Hello, and welcome to our podcast on irony, another one of those great literary devices that we are studying this year, but probably one of the most misunderstood terms. I think Alanis Morissette and her song Ironic has done a lot to really ruin our understanding of this, but let's see if we can clarify what exactly irony is. So what exactly is irony? Irony is technically the disconnect between what might be expected and what actually happens. And the key word there is what is reasonably expected. And then the next part of the definition of irony is the idea of that there is a disconnect between what is said and what is really meant. So let's go ahead and explore those a little bit further. So to clarify, the idea is that you must have a reasonable expectation that something will happen. And we will use this throughout the rest of the podcast, but basically you must have a reasonable expectation that A will happen, whatever A is, but that B does happen. And the key word is expected. Oftentimes what happens is people hope or wish that A happens, but that's a very emotional response. They're not thinking very logically, and therefore that does not really set up the idea of irony. The point is that based on the clues you're given from the text or from the scenario or from the film, is that you must expect A to happen, but then something else happens. That is irony. Irony is not coincidence. Just because I happen to be sitting in my classroom and somebody outside the room trips and falls, and it happens at the same time, that is not irony. That just happens to be at the same time. Or I happen to be going to Chipotle for dinner while my wife across the town is going to Qdoba. That's not irony. Why would it matter where she's going depending on me? There's no expectation of anything. It just happens to be two things happening at the same time. That is coincidence, and that is not irony. Additionally, just because something is funny doesn't make it ironic. For example, let's say somebody walks into class late, sits down, pulls out their notebook, and everything falls out of it. Oh, wow, that's crazy. They're dropping all kinds of stuff. Oh my goodness, that's so ironic. No, it just isn't. That is just a funny moment. Somebody dropped their things. It happens. It's life. Just because it's funny, just because it's a coincidence, doesn't make it ironic. And so we really need to go back to that original definition. What is reasonably expected? If you don't get what is reasonably expected, then you probably have an ironic situation. Why does irony matter? Just like all of our other lit terms. If an author is trying to reveal a theme, a comment on being human or a comment on humanity, he or she may wrap up key moments in ironic situations so that if you can figure them out, you might be that much closer to figuring out what the author is saying overall in terms of his or her theme or comment on what it means to be human. So here are the three common types of irony that we'll be talking about. One is called situational irony. Number two, verbal irony. And three, dramatic irony. So let's go ahead and take a couple minutes to look at each one in a little bit more depth. So situational irony takes that general definition of expecting A but getting B, but applies it to situations, to events, to things you can see or experience. There's a disconnect between what you reasonably expect to see or to experience, but then what actually happens. So what would be appropriate in a certain situation? That would be A, that's what you should expect. But if you don't get what is reasonably expected and you get the opposite, then you have a case of situational irony. For example, this would be considered situationally ironic. We have some people going into a 24-hour fitness gym. The reasonable expectation is that these people want to go there to work out, to be healthy, to exercise to the fullest. Yet, they're going to the gym by walking up an escalator. You would reasonably expect that you want to maximize your workout, so why wouldn't you take the steps in the middle? That would start your warm-up. That would be another 10 seconds of exercise. Instead of getting A, what you reasonably expect, which is to maximize your exercise potential, these people are doing the opposite. Now I get it. There's always reasons for this. Maybe they're exceptionally sore from yesterday's workout and they're just trying to warm up more gradually. I get it. But the overall expectation of going into a gym is that you work out. And so when you expect A but get B, that is ironic. Another example of situational irony may come from one of these. A fire station burning down, being locked in a supermarket overnight and starving to death, wetting your pants while you're actually in a bathroom. And so I get it. If you think a little bit more deeply about these, there could be reasonable explanations about why something like this might happen. But think about it. A fire station burning down. I mean, the expectation is there are firefighters in the fire station. All they have to do is stand up and turn on the hose. So you expect the fire to be put out immediately. There's no way it would be burned down. Now, there's always the exception. What if the firemen are out on another call, and then somebody sneaks into the firehouse when they're not there and lights it on fire, and there's nobody there to protect it? I get it. It's an exception. But the general expectation of a firehouse is that it would be safe from fire. Therefore, if a firehouse does burn down, for whatever exceptional reason, that would be situationally ironic. Looking at that last one, wetting your pants while in a bathroom. Well, what if the person's 2 and they're just learning to potty train? Of course, they're going to have accidents. They're going to make mistakes of timing. We totally get that. But if a freshman who should have a certain amount of control over their bowels is standing in a bathroom, we would think they might be able to get to the actual restroom type situation. Oh, but what if they're laughing really, really hard at a joke? I get it. But at a certain point, if you're actually in a bathroom, the reasonable expectation is that you should be able to make it to the pot. Therefore, if you don't, then that would be ironic. The next big chunk of irony we'd want to look at is what we call verbal irony. And this is speech in which what is said is the opposite of what is meant. So basically, they are saying something, the words coming out of their mouth are setting you up to believe something, but they mean the opposite. And so oftentimes you'll see that this is sarcasm. So sarcasm is a form of verbal irony, where the words that they are saying, if you take them at their face value, might sound very positive, but when the speaker is adding an intonation of making fun of somebody, or the opposite of what the words are actually saying, that would be sarcastic, and therefore that would be verbal irony. For example, something horrendous happens, some sort of crazy accident. Everybody drops their cafeteria trays at once and silverware goes flying. And the person who's going to be responsible to clean them up says, "Oh, great." Clearly the words they're saying, "great," would imply happiness and perfection and yay, I can't wait to do this. But the way they are delivering that line means the opposite. They're saying, really? I gotta clean this up? Therefore, what they said is the opposite of what they meant. That would be sarcasm. That would be verbal irony. Another example, somebody walks into the room and trips. Somebody right there trying to be funny, trying to make fun of them a little bit says, "Hey, you're a great athlete." They don't actually mean you have tremendous athletic prowess or skills. They mean, well, you're a dork for tripping over thin air. So again, what they have said is the opposite from what they actually mean. That is sarcasm. That is verbal irony. Go ahead and pause this now and see if you can deduce the sarcasm that is dripping in this fictional conversation between a divorced couple. We now need to actually make a connection back to our math classes in terms of squares and rectangles. If you go back to the definition of a square versus a rectangle, and you ask yourself, are all squares rectangles? The answer is yes, because by definition, they have 2 sets of parallel sides, they have 4 90-degree angles. That is a rectangle. Therefore, since all squares have those, they are rectangles. But can it go the other way? Are all rectangles squares? And there the answer is no, because the element that makes squares squares is that all four sides are equal in length. Therefore, all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. Let's tie that back into irony. All sarcasm is verbal irony, because you are saying the opposite of what you mean. But not all verbal irony has to be sarcastic. The point of sarcasm is to make fun of something, to reveal the opposite, usually to imply some sort of malintent. You're trying to mock somebody. But not all verbal irony is negative. You could certainly say something and mean the opposite, but not try to be mean. Therefore, sarcasm is verbal irony, but not all verbal irony is sarcastic. The last form of irony that we'd like to look at is what we call dramatic irony. And this kind of breaks from the idea of expecting A and getting B instead. Dramatic irony is when a reader or listener or viewer understands more of what's going on in a story than the characters themselves do. And I think the classic example comes in the form of cartoons. You get Tom and Jerry chasing each other around the place. Tom is the cat, Jerry is the mouse. Jerry the mouse goes around a corner and pulls out some humongous, massive hammer. We, the audience, see what's going to happen when the cat rounds the corner. He's going to get clubbed in the head by the tiny mouse with the massive hammer. So we, the audience, get all nervous and go, "Oh, Tom, don't run around that corner. You're going to get clubbed." But Tom, the cat, is not privy to that information. So he mindlessly chases Jerry around the corner, and then kaboom, he gets beaten down with the massive hammer. That instance where we're feeling nervous for the cat, or we're feeling excited like we know something more than Tom the cat, and we want to just reach out and warn him, that is dramatic irony, where we, the audience, know more than what the characters in the play or novel or movie actually know. And so when you know what the definition of dramatic irony is, it's a good idea to kind of think about what kind of emotions might be felt or created by this situation. And oftentimes it's this kind of nervous energy, like you know the bad guy's hiding behind the door. You know the bad guy's going to jump out of the shadows and hurt the person in the scary movie. We know that, but the character on film or in the book does not. Therefore, you get emotions like nervous energy or tension or just excitement, and oftentimes this is played out in the form of humor, as in the Tom and Jerry example. We know Tom is going to get whacked in the head. But because it's a cartoon, because it's a cat chasing a mouse, we giggle and say, how funny, how funny. We know this is going to happen, but Tom doesn't. Oh, don't go behind there. Oh, too late. Club to the head. And so you get these ideas where we, the audience, know more than the characters involved. And that is dramatic irony. So that concludes our look at the definitions of irony. Just to review, we have situational irony, and this is where you expect A but get B. We have verbal irony, where you have said A, but you have meant B. Oftentimes that comes in the form of sarcasm, but not always. And then ultimately we have dramatic irony, where we know something that the characters don't. And so we will definitely take a look at our notes and start applying this with some movie clips as soon as you guys get back to class and seeing some of these in action. Needless to say, we will be examining Alanis Morissette's pretty infamous song called Ironic. And our question is going to be, what is ironic about her song Ironic? I think you will be intrigued and you will find some nice points and contrast to the definition of irony. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to bring those in. Bring in your notes and we will go over those in class. Thanks so much for watching and we will see you soon.